Civil disobedience is when you're actually going to break the law, when you're going to do something illegal, when you're actually going to get a fine, go to jail, go against the government in that way. The category is this: you only do that, according to the biblical examples, when you cannot obey both God and government. When you cannot obey both God and government. That's quite a specific category, because sometimes you might just have to change something a little and you can obey God and government, right? This is a situation where you just can't. This is a situation like Acts chapter 5, and this can come in two different forms. You can be told to do something which is sinful, and you say, okay, we're drawing the line. The other thing you can be told to do is not to do something which it would be sinful not to do. And again, you draw the line. So the apostles had a case like that in Acts chapter 5, when they were told to stop speaking in the name of Jesus. No, he just said, go and make disciples of all nations, And so they said, no, we've got to obey God rather than men. We've got a real conflict here. We can't do both. And so what they did was they prayed for boldness, and they didn't just break the law, they broke it pretty hard. What you will notice in these cases of civil disobedience, when they realize that clearly the line has been crossed, they give no quarter. So the apostles didn't actually change their ministry in any way. They didn't decide to go soft, go quiet, do a rebrand, keep away from the synagogues, just talk to people one-on-one rather than scream in the public squares. They decided that they'd just keep on going because there's no business in stopping this. We can't stop and we won't change anything. That's what they did. So it was disobedience, and it was bold disobedience. Daniel is another example of this. So Daniel was always deferential to the king. He always honoured him. The way he spoke to Nebuchadnezzar and others, great respect. It says he had great tact and subtlety in the way that he spoke. It says that about him. However, days came when trouble came to Daniel's door, and what happened? Don't pray to any god except Darius for 30 days. Now Daniel goes, well, I can't do that. Even can't do it temporarily, so I can't stop praying for 30 days. That'd be sinful. And so he decides he's going to pray for 30 days. But you notice he didn't even leave his window. He said, no, the king's gone too far on this, and I have to disobey, so I will continue doing exactly what I was doing. Now that's bravery. I mean, he knew, he'd read the king's edict, it says. He knew he was going to be chucked to the lions. What a guy. Amazing. The other thing, of course, in Daniel's case was eating the king's food. Again, he was probably only 14, 15 years old. And again, it's a brainwashing exercise. It's a university recruitment thing. He's going to be a servant in the king's household. He's got a great future. And he gets told, well, all you need to do is defile yourself with eating food offered to idols. And again, he actually was very wise in that case, but he didn't go near it. He didn't break the rules. But he was very wise. He went and he appealed to the eunuch, and he tried what he could do. He tried what he could to do that in a respectable way. Those really are our examples. And there are moments when we may have to pray for boldness and break the law. But those moments are small. They're minimal still in our society. Let me take some examples. The Victorian legislation on Change and Suppression Act, it effectively says, if a gay man were to come to you and say, please pray for me that I, won't act on my same-sex attractions, well, the law says that's illegal. It's pretty blatant. I tell you, you've got to pray for that guy. I mean, pray for him out loud if you like. That is something the government cannot overstep. That is wrong. It would be sin for you to say, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I would say change nothing. The way I say it is live as if the law doesn't exist in that moment. Do what you would do anyway, as Daniel did, as the apostles did. Risky, right? But it's just what we've got to do. And it's the example that is given for us. Again, if you're a pastor and you're preaching through the Bible and you get to Romans 1, you just got to do exactly what you would do otherwise. You don't let that law change what you're doing. You flagrantly disobey it, as long as I can still say that. And so on. There are those sorts of moments. But there are other moments where we've got to go along with it for the sake of peace. I'll just let you in on a secret. I really, really hate face masks. I really do. I mean, I know they're limited in their effectiveness, and I think, honestly, that the value that they pose to stopping the spread of viruses is minuscule compared to the value of seeing people's faces, especially for kids growing up. I think that the social cost that is being imposed on people is way out of proportion, certainly to the risk as it is right now. That's what I think. But you know what? It's not a sin for me to put a face mask on. And I was thinking about this the other day. There is a moment in the Gospels where Jesus is talking to the disciples about the temple tax. And that's when they sort of ask him, basically, should we pay the tax? And without going into the detail, the answer he gives is indicative of the fact that, well, really, they shouldn't have to pay the tax. But then he says, nonetheless, to prevent giving an offence, he says, go and find a fish and pull out of its mouth the coin that's going to be there when you find it, and go and pay the tax for you and for me. And he's saying, you know what, don't cause offence on this one. It's not the right thing to be a stumbling block over. It's not an evangelistic thing, really. It's just something you've got to go along with. You know, a lot of people don't like it. A lot of people love it, but I don't. And it's important too because that is also an issue of non-division among Christians as well. One of the sad things about the pandemic and vaccinations and face masks and all that is it's torn apart Christians. And actually it just really, really mustn't. I think that's one of the satanic ends to which this was sent, was to tear us apart. And therefore it's something that you don't want to give offence over. And you know, I've been to churches where they don't bother with any of the rules. I've been to churches where they're absolutely fastidious about the rules. When I go somewhere that's fastidious about the rules, I'm careful too, because I don't want to give offence. There's nothing sinful about it. And you might say, well, the government's evil, the government's stupid, blah, 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 blah. I know, all right? But here's the thing. This comes back to the same point that we made several times at the beginning. Again, I find here that there is a line where God says, you know what, that's in my hands beyond that point. In Daniel chapter 2, it says, he sets up kings and removes kings. He says that I've given authority and I'm going to require a reckoning for that authority. And also, you know, the way the world is going, the political changes that are taking place, you know, if I could put it this way, Babylon is rising, right? And the reality is that quite possibly there's going to be nothing we can do to stop Babylon from rising. We might just be asked to live in Babylon, like Daniel was. And that might actually be where this is all going to end up in due course. And of course, in Daniel's day, what was going on in that authority structure was in God's hands. Nebuchadnezzar was converted. My goodness, he had an incredible experience. And God also brought down that empire as well when the time came. Again, it's a question of what has God told us is in his hands. And I don't know how he's going to bring all the kingdoms of the earth together and how he's going to do what he's going to do in the fullness of time. But it's all right. He hasn't necessarily asked for my help in this matter. And I'm quite confident he can achieve it. So I'll do what I can, but then I'll understand that where I don't understand why there's a line, that's the bit that's in God's hands.